Greg Collins, Substitute Teachers Lounge. Have you ever had one of those students that just seems to do everything right from her behavior to her grades? We're going to talk about Audrey today. What do you think, kids?
Substitute Teachers Lounge.
All right, as in past weeks, let me remind you that all of the stories that I'm sharing today are true about this student, but I went into Google, had it generate a name for me. So if I'm talking about a guy and it generated a girl's name, well, I'm going to talk about a girl today, and vice versa when that happens. So we want to keep everything confidential. The story is true. The name, so to speak, is fictitious. So keep that in mind as we go through this. You know, we've done a couple of troublemakers in the past week, and I want to do a couple of positive ones now. It's interesting, though, the most popular episode, except for the first one, was the episode number 10 about, oh no, I have a troublemaker in my class today. That is continually searched out and listened to more than any others. So it's funny how we want to know how to handle troublemakers. That is where we need the advice. But we want some positive stories too. So we're going to talk about Audrey today. Let me mention real quick, email address, gregcollinssubstitute@gmail.com, Twitter @SubTeachLounge, Instagram @Substitute Teachers Lounge, and then finally, we have that Facebook page that is growing more and more each day, Substitute Teachers Lounge. Speaking of growing, I was kind of shocked when Buzzsprout told me the number of listens we have had in the past week. It's higher than it's ever been. There was a time when I would have a goal of 100 listens per episode in the first week after release. This past week, we've had 100 listens per day. Now, not all on the most recent episode, but we're picking up a lot of, I guess people that are getting ready to go back and substitute teach or even teach. They're listening. They're listening to a lot of the different episodes as we go on. So I'm excited for that. In fact, I'm going to mention an email I got just in a moment here. I also want to mention, the book I did, it's the Substitute Teachers Lounge Chronicles. I told you about it last week. It is on Amazon. You can buy Kindle or you can buy paperback. It was a lot of work to edit and get in shape. It's transcripts of the 10 of the most popular episodes, including one of the more recent ones about how our lives are going to change when we go back to the classroom because of the pandemic. So it's going better than I thought. I mean, I wanted to make sure I got it out because Amazon provides such great free resources. It took me weeks to get it to the point that I wanted it, and then Amazon published it in about 30 minutes. I've even changed the covers a couple of times, so I like the cover I have now. It's cool. It's exciting for me that when I now go into the book section of Amazon and just type in Substitute Teacher, my book does appear on the first page. It bounces around, but it appears on that first page, so I'm getting some purchases that way. I hope it's as exciting for you as it is for me. And also, you can now, it's starting to register what the ranking is. And the ranking's not huge. I mean, I'm not going to be up there with, Jen Stevens, for that matter, who I interviewed a few weeks back about Fast Fees for Pete. Love her book. But it's up there with a lot of teacher books that I own. And I'm excited that I'm at least holding my own in that group. And I want you to the great thing about Amazon is you can look inside the book and actually read. I think it will let you read the introduction and all the way through the first chapter. So do that. You can do that for free and then just decide if you want the book. So very excited about that. Then finally, let me tell you about an email I got this week from Carrie. Carrie is going to interview soon to become a substitute teacher. I thought that was great. He found our podcast. He's been listening to it. He loves it. I love the fact that he got in touch with me. I told him that I wanted to interview him after his first few weeks of substituting. That's one thing we haven't done, I don't think, is actually enter a fresh substitute and get their impression of just maybe the first several days. But Carrie, thanks for writing in. Carrie said he went, just like I described before, went straight to episode 10 about the troublemaker in class. I guess like a lot of you have done. And he liked it so much he listened to it twice. So thanks, Carrie, and good luck to you. And we will be back in touch soon. All right, let's talk about Audrey. You know, you've probably got somebody like this in most every classroom situation. Audrey, if I was allowed to say there was a perfect student, she would be it. And let me describe why. It's, I described the last 2 weeks as troublemakers. I would call Audrey trouble-free. There's so many things that she does in the classroom that just makes the class go much more smoothly for you. Of course, the classroom's all about education, so let's start with that first. Audrey has always been the kind of student that, I've taught her in several different disciplines, and I've actually taught her multiple days in a row, and then there might be sometimes what I know I don't actually run into her unless I just happen to be in the building. I might run into her in the hallway. There's times when I haven't taught her for a while, but she still has that, she still reminds me of how well behaved she was in the classroom. So first of all, it's the behavior. To have a good educational atmosphere, you have to have that good behavior. She was always one that hands would go up. She would always volunteer to answer questions. She would always help to all the other students in the classroom if need be. She would always pay close attention when things were going on. She might even try to get students quiet in a diplomatic way so they could not, she might say it because so that she could hear better, but she really had their thoughts in mind too. So that was the kind of student, straight A student. She wanted to learn anytime. Most of the time she understood well. If she just had a question or two, she'd make sure she asked about it. So that's her background. And it's kind of unusual. She had that same impression on all the teachers, and she actually had the same impression on the students. I never ran into anybody, adult or student, who did not like Audrey. So that's the kind of student we talked about. And I don't care how much trouble you've had in the classroom. If I told you to close your eyes and think right now, you can probably think of one of the students that you would put in Audrey's category. So we're always thankful that we have students like that. I even mention, as great as it was, are there any things that I need to be aware of even when I'm dealing with a student like that? We'll talk about that here as we get a little bit further along. So now you have the background. You walk into the classroom, you can normally tell within minutes that Audrey is that kind of student. And you wish you had a classroom full of them, but that's not realistic. It's not realistic in the classroom, not realistic in life. And I've had my moments too. So I'm sure teachers wish I would shut up from time to time. But, that's the kind of student that we're talking about today. Maybe there's no perfect student, but Audrey went out of her way to try to see how much she could help everyone and how much she could improve herself. Probably one of the things that got me close to a student like this is she actually participated, and there's some in every school. I won't tell you which one it was to kind of further keep things confidential. Some have Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Some have what they call first priority. Some have, I think it's just called student fellowship, where they just share a little Bible story. And usually every school has, Christian or otherwise, has someone in there that likes to tell Christian stories, and read from the Bible. She participated in that, and that's where I probably talked to her most often, because she would, if they ever asked me to say some words, I would. She would be one of those that would participate as well, and I got to know Audrey better even that way. So I actually met Audrey's parents too, so that always helps. She comes from a good home, at least by first appearances. I'm sure, there's not a teenager born yet that didn't at times think their parents were what? Crazy? Is that too strong a word? I know my kids thought I was crazy. Some of the things I did, I might have thought my parents were crazy. Some of the things they did, I realized they were making the best decisions for me, or maybe the best recommendations would be the strong recommendations would be the best way to say it. And I hope my kids feel that way about me too. But I did get to meet her parents. That was a positive thing. I'm sure they contributed to her being positive all the time. She was never really intimidated by others. Even if I never did really see other students pick on her for any reason. I don't know why they would. There was no reason to. But, there was sometimes students will pick on others if they get better grades than them, if they maybe help out the teacher more than others. I never saw that with Audrey, because she was such a nice personality and had such good interaction with all the other students as well. So it was really a great situation. With those thoughts in mind, it's probably, sometimes, a little bit like last week's episode, you'll have students that are arrogant because of their success in the classroom. Not that way with Audrey. I mean, she was always very positive. She would help others and never make them feel like that they should feel bad for not understanding. In fact, I would hear her from time to time, whether it was true or not. She would say things like, I used to have that problem with these two. Here's what I did to help me understand better. And she would tell them what they did, what she would do at home sometimes, and she really helped out those students. So that's Audrey. And she also helped me grow, and here's how. She could kind of sense in the classroom when somebody was struggling but didn't want to ask about it, and maybe she would make some suggestions, but if she felt like that student needed a little bit more help from the teacher, she would come up to me in private and just say, hey, I think, so-and-so student is struggling a little bit. I know I saw them look around when you made this comment for us to take notes about, like maybe they didn't understand it. And she knew me well enough and she knew I would handle it diplomatically and not tell anyone that she's the one that told them they needed help. So it helped me grow in that way, because then I could go to students that I might not otherwise have identified, but because Audrey came up to me and told me about it, I was able to go to them and help them through the issues that they had. One thing my mama always told me, and I tried, and my father too for that matter, and I tried to convey to my own kids who are now all in their 30s and have kids of their own, that, you can't help but influence others. It's your choice as to whether you influence them for the good or the bad. Well, I noticed Audrey, she would always influence for the good. She would help them develop better study habits. She would help them feel comfortable asking me questions. She would be so pleasant with them. She would be one of those, if she could tell somebody felt bad, depending on how serious it looked, she would try to help them to feel better and be understanding with them and just listen. So I really appreciated that about her. One of the things that I was absolutely most impressed with, it was in a situation where I had probably taught this class. There's several teachers, thank goodness. I'm blessed in that I have several teachers that call me back all the time. So the students, this was a class where I had probably had this particular class and this particular subject matter several days. And one of the days, she just volunteered to go up, get the broom. It was actually, I think it was when we had we had the need to use scissors and pencils and that type of thing, colored pencils, markers to create things. And she picked up the broom and started cleaning up the room at the end of class. And she did that once. And obviously I thanked her, and she did it again on another day. I thanked her again. And before long, what I noticed, she had other students helping her. So what a good influence is that? Not only excelled in behavior, in attitude, in grades, but she also would go out of her way to help out, voluntarily help out. And that she wasn't wanting any candy. I might have some students that come up and say, Mr. Collins, if I clean the room up for you, can I have a couple pieces of candy? Well, she didn't do that. I gave her candy for doing that from time to time, but that's not the reason she did that. So that's another thing that Audrey always made me feel great about, and I know she was a good influence on the other students. I'll interrupt just a moment because I'm excited. While I was recording this, I saw something pop up on my iPhone from my Ring doorbell that somebody was at the front door. And it was actually a delivery person from Amazon that brought me some copies of the book I was telling you about, The Substitute Teachers Lounge Chronicles. Amazon lets authors purchase copies for giveaways. That's what I'm going to do, and you'll hear about that in future weeks. So let's get back to Audrey. You've heard so much positive stuff about Audrey so far. I guess the last thing I will say about how great a student she was there would be times, of course, in the classroom, you always have to channel what you're working on basically towards maybe the students that need the most help so that everyone understands. You've got to challenge them, of course, but there may be times when students like Audrey are not challenged enough. So you have to work through all that and make sure you challenge everyone sufficiently. Now, she would never come up to me and say, Mr. Collins, this comes so easy to me. Do you have anything else? But I would try to keep things like that for those that needed additional challenges. They would always have something to work on. Now, interestingly enough, Audrey wasn't one that I would often see reading a book when she had time in class. I know she read, but usually in the classes I was in, she would concentrate on whatever the subject matter of that class was and study something along that vein if she finished her work. So that was also one of the things that Audrey did well. Now, that's all the positive things I'm going to share, and obviously, I think you can sum up that I'm not going to have anything negative to share about Audrey. I will tell you this, even with a student this positive, it offers challenges to the teacher because you don't want to over involve Audrey on one side. Since I know I can depend on her, it's really that way in life too. You have adults that you can depend on to get something done, and that's usually who you go back to. Audrey's the same way as a student. If I needed something done, I knew I could always go to her and she would get it done. She would be the one that would even ask some of the other students if they would like to help her with this too. I had to make sure that I didn't overemphasize that, and I tried to get as many people involved too. I didn't want to put Audrey in a situation where the kids could refer to as a teacher's pet. That's the last thing I want, because I definitely want to be one that teach all the students equally, but it causes a challenge nevertheless. You want to make sure that you don't give Audrey a lot more advantages because of her behavior. It's okay to treat her well. She didn't give you any trouble, so we're treating her well. Maybe she gets some benefits that others have to work at harder to earn. I wouldn't say she ever got benefits that other students would not get because of the way they behaved in class. I think every student in the room can clean up their grades and their behavior enough to be rewarded as well. So you had to worry about that. I didn't want to single her out. She did a good job of that on her own. just in the way she acted. She was never arrogant. She never went around and said, Mr. Collins likes me more than they like you. So she would never say anything like that. But I could allow her to get benefits, maybe run errands for me. Even that, I try to spread around to others in the class. In fact, I'll be honest, I have noticed that when I ask some of the students that don't get involved a lot and maybe struggle, if they're the ones I say, can you run this up to the office for me? It's amazing how just having them do something like that, all of a sudden they open up in class, they are more comfortable around you, and it's really kind of funny how that works out like that sometimes. So I don't want to have Audrey be my office runner all the time just because she earned it. I want to spread that around as well. So I don't want to simply make sure that everybody knows that Audrey's one of my favorite students in class. I think she has created a situation for herself that she's one of the favorite students with everybody. So she has brought that on herself, and I don't feel guilty about allowing her to do things. And at the same time, I don't want to favor her and leave a lot of students out of learning as well as the fun activities we might have. I like to point out when Audrey has done well. I'll make an example of her to class. I'll make an example of anybody in class who improves as well. I've done that often, so we don't want to just single out one student over and over. You don't want to be hokey about it either, but you want to make sure you share everybody's accomplishments within that class because that picks them up and helps them do better consistently. So I don't want to show favoritism towards Audrey. I don't want to go the other direction either, where she's so well behaved. I know I don't need to bother emphasizing anything with her because she'll tell me if she needs something. I still want to make sure I show her just as much attention as everyone and treat her as well as I try to treat everyone. I've actually had this thought pop into my head that it may motivate other students sometimes if I would ask Audrey in advance if I ever planned to do this. If I ever came across where she might have made a small mistake, there's a part of me that says, all right, with Audrey's permission, if I pointed that out in class, they would know she is human too. I've never really done that, but I can see how that would be motivating to the rest of the class, that even somebody like Audrey makes those mistakes. Now, I know if I ask Audrey that, she wouldn't care. She wouldn't care at all. Maybe as I get to know her and students like that better, I'll ask them if they mind me sharing what they did in class and how they learned from it. So that's something we can do as well. So that's Audrey in a nutshell. She is a very great student. I wish we had a bunch of her all the time, but she's such a good influence that she makes the entire class better. Now, I will tell you this. Next week, we're going to have another positive one, and I'm still going to use the random name generator, but I'm going to have to make it a girl's name because we're going to talk about the volleyball player that helped me grow as an adult. Now, that's a tall order, so make sure you're here to listen to that next week. I think you'll really enjoy it. Now, don't say, oh, he's going to talk about extracurricular again, and I'm not in a position where I can do that. It really has nothing to do with that because it's going to be about things that happen on the volleyball court, but it's also going to be about things that happen with that player when I either had her in class, saw her in the hallway, or several things that happened even before I ever had her in a classroom. I just happened to meet her on the volleyball court. So make sure you're here for that one. Again, we'll keep it confidential like all the rest. Hey, check out that book this week, The Substitute Teachers Lounge Chronicles. At least go out there and read the free stuff. The more you click, the more everybody's going to like it. Now, I think what I'll do in the future, I'm going to have a giveaway, and everybody that participates by giving the podcast, going into Apple Podcast and giving it a 5-star rating and review will be eligible. I'm still considering how to roll that out. And then we'll also have a promotion eventually where we will cut the rate. I know the Kindle edition is $4.69. We'll go through a sale where one day it's $1.99, one day it goes up to $2.99, and let you save some money that way too. So I am happy we were here to talk about Audrey this week. I'm glad I got to talk about one of the positive students. There's a bunch of them. I've talked about troublemaker students. There's a bunch of them. I love them all. I want to make sure they get the best education, and I know you do too. I've got perhaps my busiest week coming up since the pandemic started. On Monday, I'm volunteering to help at a golf tournament, a girls' golf tournament that is hosted by a school that my son-in-law is a coach for. Then on Tuesday, I'll record another podcast. I'm a producer of a podcast called The Church Debater and Preacher Mike. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, that's what I'm doing Tuesday. Wednesday, I actually have all-day training at one of the schools I'll be substitute teaching at this year. Friday, I'm going to a zoo with my wife, with my son, his wife, and my grandchild. And, you can rest assured that all of those activities are being organized in a socially distanced way. So I don't want you worrying about me this week, but I'm looking forward to a busy week this week. See you on the next episode. Music provided by Ben Sound.